teleported, oh, wouldn't this be cool if we could, to ancient Jerusalem. Okay, that's where we are. Imagine that we are all part of the remnant, the 42,000, and we're in the Times Square because Zechariah, who has been boots on the ground with us, shoulder to shoulder, building the temple, tells us that he has something to say. Now, last week we heard from the other prophet who was boots on the ground, and his name was what? Funny name? Haggai, right? And he had messages that we directed towards Zerubbabel, and also Zechariah had one for Zerubbabel, right? Well, Zechariah, he gathers everybody. So here we are, we're all together in the Times Square, and he says, you guys, I had the craziest night. In a night, I got 8 visions from the Lord. And this angel would not let me sleep. He kept smacking me and dumping water on my head. And he's like, Zechariah, wake up. You got 6 more to go. And all night, in a night, Zechariah gets 8 visions. Almost the entire book of Zechariah happened in one night. Okay, so he tells us, he's like, okay, so I had this wild night, and he does look a little tired. We're like, yeah, you look, here's some coffee. And he's like, I have to tell you this one. And we're like, okay. He's like, this one's for Joshua. Now, Joshua's with us. He's here. So is Zerubbabel, right? We're all gathered together. And Joshua's there. And I wonder if maybe Joshua and Zerubbabel were standing together. And Joshua nudges Zerubbabel and says, I only got 1. You got 4. I got 1. I mean, how bad could it be? I got 1 message. You got 4 messages. Neener, neener, neener. Well, it's a doozy. Okay? So we are gathered together. Joshua is with us. Zerubbabel is with us. And we're in the midst of the remnant. And when Zechariah begins to speak, we are stunned, speechless. Check this out. Zechariah chapter 3, verse 1. So he showed me, that is Zechariah, Joshua the high priest, standing before the angel of the Lord, and Satan standing at his right hand to accuse him. Pause. What? Okay, so we're all in the Times Square in Jerusalem, right? And all of a sudden, we get lifted off the ground and stuck in heaven. This vision is in heaven. So we're all in heaven now, and we're watching this whole thing unfold, and we find ourselves in a courtroom. But not just any courtroom, the heavenly courtroom, or in other words, we are in the throne room. That's where we are. In the throne room. Okay? That's really important. Now, we're going to get oriented with the players on the field. So, in order, who is mentioned first? Joshua. Who is Joshua? What's his title? High priest. This is something to keep in the front of your eyeballs the entire night. Remember his title, the high priest. Okay, so Joshua is there. Who else is there? The angel of the Lord. Who's that? Jesus. Bible students. The Old Testament, the angel of the Lord is a title for Jesus. Okay? Old Testament. Now, who is he, though, in this courtroom scene? He's Joshua's defense attorney. Courtroom. Joshua's defense attorney. Jesus is standing there on behalf of Joshua. Okay? Who's the next player? Satan, the prosecutor. He's the prosecutor in court. He's a judicial accuser. He's the one who called this trial to order. He's the one who's bringing evidence to the judge. Okay? You guys got this so far? Courtroom, heaven, players. Okay? Now, who else is here? Yes, the Lord. The Lord is here, and he is sitting as the righteous judge. He's the judge. He's the one on the bench as judge. He's the one with the gavel. Okay? He's the one who rules this courtroom with justice and righteousness. He's sitting on the throne. The Lord, Jehovah, Yahweh. He's also here. And who else is here? Us. We're here. We're the remnant. Now, who are we? We're in the peanut gallery. We're spectators. Okay? We are here, though, in this thing. And we are watching this criminal trial because Zechariah is telling us about this trial. We're watching this trial, and court is in session. So we're sitting in the gallery, and we see Yahweh on the throne as judge. And we see Joshua right there, and Jesus standing as his defense attorney, and we see Satan as the prosecutor. And those are the players. Okay, you guys got that? The criminal, the felon, the wrongdoer is one of our own. Who is on trial? Joshua, the high priest. What? Wait a minute. This is like Dateline. This is scandalous that Joshua is on trial. He's the criminal. He's the felon. He's the one that is doing something wrong. And we gasp and we grimace and we shake our heads. Imagine the whispers happening in the town square when Zechariah opens this court scene and says, Joshua's a criminal. That's what the Lord told me. And we go, what? The high priest? What are you saying, Zechariah? Are you saying that Joshua, the high priest, is on trial? You mean that guy right there? Our high priest is on trial? Yeah, it's true. He's on trial. Now, look at Zechariah chapter 3, verse 2. Okay, next verse. The Lord, who's that? God. Who is who in the courtroom? The judge, right? The one with the gavel. Said to Satan, the prosecutor, the Lord rebuke you, O Satan. The Lord who has chosen Jerusalem rebuke you. Is not this a brand plucked from the fire? Now, what is a brand? A burning stick. A brand is a stick that's in a fire pit and it's on fire. Okay? And somebody with a mitt or something or tongs, I don't know, snatches it out of the fire. And now it's charred. Okay? But it's rescued at the last minute. That's a brand, a burning stick. Now, I want to read you this story. I found this with this verse, and I think it's really cool. So sit back and check this out. Okay, February 9th, 1709. The Epworth Rectory caught fire, the home of Reverend Samuel and Susanna Wesley. Their 11-year-old daughter woke first to burning pieces of roof that was falling on her bed. So she ran to wake her father, who was sleeping in the guest quarters because her mother was ill and in her 3rd trimester of pregnancy. Dude. The burning roof was caving in everywhere, blocking passages out. The father, Samuel, sprung to action. He had his pregnant wife and 8 children in the house with all of his servants. Okay? The mother, Susanna, managed to get herself and her 2 eldest daughters away from the home, and they ran into the garden. One servant broke a window and climbed out with 2 other daughters. The children's nurse, whose name was Betty, ran to the nursery for the youngest of them. With a baby in one arm and a 1-year-old in the other, This was a busy family. Anybody catching these ages? Oh, jeez. Woo! She yelled at the 5-year-old they called Jackie and told him sternly to follow her out into the garden. She didn't have any arms left, and there was a 5-year-old. So she's got an infant and a 1-year-old and is telling this 5-year-old to follow her out, okay? But when she got to the garden, Jackie wasn't with her. He had reversed in fear and buried himself somewhere in the house. Samuel attempted to get his son several times, the father, only to be beaten back by the flames that now consumed the staircase. After his final attempt, defeated and burned, he returned to the garden. The family knelt there together and, quote, prayed God to receive his soul. Jackie, who we know as John Wesley, wrote of this event later in his life. He obviously lived. Wesley, that's a spoiler, recalls yelling for help and finally going to a door. Finally, he went to the window that his sisters had jumped out of earlier where, quote, one saw me in the yard. With no time to find a ladder, a couple of quick-thinking neighbors did the next best thing. One stood on the other's shoulders and pulled Jackie through the window, quote, just as the roof fell into his chamber, his mother reported. His improbable rescue was quickly declared a miracle. I couldn't believe it, his father wrote a week later, till I had kissed him 2 or 3 times. While the family lost every possession they had, they were all saved. John Wesley remembers his father calling out from the garden as the fire continued to rage behind them, saying, come, neighbors, let us kneel down. Let us give thanks to God. He has given me all 8 of my children. Let the house go. I am rich enough. After the fire, Susanna, the mama, referred to Jackie as her brand pulled from the burning fire, a reference to Zechariah 3 verse 2, stating that God preserved the life of her son. Nearly 45 years later, Wesley remembered his mother's words. Lying in bed, sick with consumption, Wesley wrote an epitaph for himself in case he didn't recover, which he did. He lived another 30 years. It's a little fatalistic, but that's fine. He wrote an epitaph, and it says this. The would-be inscription he penned in his journal began, here lieth the body of John Wesley, a brand plucked out of the burning. In summarizing his life, at the end of life, he could have talked about many achievements and great works of service to the Lord. Instead, he summed up his remarkable life with the words his mom ascribed to him when he was just 5 years old. Here lieth a brand plucked from the fire, a man rescued by the Lord for his purpose. I love that. A mama who knows the word. I love that. A brand plucked from the fire. That's exactly what the Lord is saying about Joshua. He was literally, his buns were burning. But I plucked him out of the fire. And the Lord turns to Satan and says, he belongs to me. He is mine, the Lord said. He is chosen and he is saved. And that was the Lord's rebuke to the prosecutor. That guy, he's mine. Now, what do you mean? The prosecutor yells across the courtroom. What do you mean? Look at him. He's guilty. Look at verse 3. Now Joshua was standing before the angel, clothed with filthy garments. Oof. Now, let's take a minute and remind ourselves of things that the remnant doesn't need reminding of because they're with the high priest every day. But let's talk really quick about the high priest because that is the essence of this story that's going on. So let's do a reminder. We're going to talk about his duty and duds because I needed 2 Ds. And I couldn't think of anything else. His duty and his duds. Just grace me, all right? Just love it. Thank you very much. Just love it anyway. Okay, his duty. His duty, he's the highest spiritual leader. You guys know that, right? He's the best that Judah's got. He's the best that Judah has. He's the high priest. He's the VIP of everything spiritual. Now remember, this is Old Testament. This is pre-cross. Just keep that in mind. Pre-cross, the high priest stood as mediator between God and man. The high priest represented man to God and represented God to man. It was important that both those things were traveling, right? So that's a huge duty. Anybody want that job? Said no one ever. No one wants that job. Okay, duty. The Super Bowl of their duty is Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. They do things every day, all day long at the temple with sacrifices and incense. But just to kind of wrap it up, the Super Bowl is Yom Kippur, right? Where he would go behind the veil and sprinkle blood on the Ark of the Covenant to make atonement for the sins of the entire nation. Now do you want the job? No. If the priest was not perfect, blameless in himself, he would be struck dead. It happens so often, Rabbi's tradition tells us, that they began to tie bells to their ankles with a rope. That if they stopped hearing, if they heard a thud and then no jingling, they knew he croaked. And because they can't go in, they would pull him out. And then there would be a job offering. Okay, duds. Now, priests had two outfits. Really easy. Wouldn't you love that? Like a uniform every day? I pretty much do. I wear the same thing every day. I only have like 3 shirts and they're all black. So there you go. Duds. Okay, they're duds. The priests have two outfits. Something they called a golden outfit and then a white outfit. Okay, let's talk about the golden outfit. The golden outfit is what the priests wore every single day. It was their uniform. Okay? It was robes of blue and purple with gold thread going through all of the robes with gemstones on their shoulders. Okay, and then they had a white turban on his head with a gold plate that says holiness to Jehovah. How daunting is that? That was his daily outfit, okay? It's called the golden outfit. Now, white outfit. There's a golden outfit and the white outfit. White he would only wear on Yom Kippur, on the Day of Atonement, and he had 2 sets of garments. So in the morning, he would leave his house in his golden garments, and when it came time to go sprinkle blood on the Ark of the Covenant, he would change into these bleach white, perfect, spotless. No one had ever touched these garments before. These garments that he would wear, and then he would go into the Ark of the Covenant, cross his fingers, and hopefully come out. Okay, and then the rest of the day, he would change back into his golden garbs, go about his day, and at the end of the night, change back into another set of white garments to go do the incense. And that was Yom Kippur. When he came out, those garments were retired forever. He wore them for about a minute. They had to be that pristine, that perfect, okay? And that was the white garments. Okay, note, if in conduct or in apparel he was found unclean, not only would he die, but there would be no atonement for the nation. Till next year. Big job. Big responsibility. Now, back to the courtroom, back in heaven. This is why it's a big deal. because we're at the heavenly throne room, right? And this heavenly court scene is going on. We're sitting in the gallery gaping at our high priest because back in the town square, he was in his golden garments. But here in the throne room, his garments are what? Filthy garments. Uh-oh. Now, the word filthy, without getting explicit, although write it down, it's explicit. The word filthy is only used one time in the Old or New Testament, this specific word, and it is a foul, God cusses. It's an oath. It is the most foul, explicit word that you can have in the Hebrew language. It's putrid, it's stenchy, it's excrement. And it's only used once. And it is used to describe what Joshua is wearing. Okay? So here's Joshua before the Ark of the Covenant in the Holy of Holies, the real one. He's in the throne room of heaven, standing there before the righteous judge, Jehovah, and he stands there covered in feces, putrid, foul. Our high priest is reeking of it in the courtroom. Now, back in the town square, we are stunned and we are mute for what we just heard, what Zechariah is trying to tell us. We are struck with terror, actually, because Joshua is stripped bare for the truth of it. This is our high priest. He's the best we've got. He's the high priest. Are you saying, Zechariah, are you saying that our high priest is defiled? Because if our high priest is defiled, we're toast. What are you saying? What are you trying to say? We are in big trouble. And it's not like a little spot on his white garment. He is covered in foul stench from head to toe. And the remnant is thinking, then there's no atonement for sin for us. So catch the scene, because we are staring at Joshua and he's right here standing with us in this assembly, a lot like this, much bigger, but a lot like this, and all eyes are on Joshua, because to us, he's standing in golden garments, right? It's an everyday. That's his outfit. He's standing bling-blinged in these bling-bling outfits that no one can actually pronounce, turns out. Glittering in the sunshine, and it's perfect, but it's not true. Joshua's righteousness, the best we've got, is confronted by the brilliant and awesome perfection of the righteous judge. Compared to the perfection he's standing in front of, he is dung. His imperfection was exposed by true perfection, and he's the best that we can do. Isaiah tells us that we have all, how many is that? All of us, remnant. We have all become like the unclean. And all, how many is that? All our righteous deeds, the very best that we can do, the very best that we can bring before the King, are nothing more than what? Polluted garments. The best we've got is filthy rags. Righteousness that we have in ourselves is nothing better than a polluted garment. And Satan, the relentless, vicious, cunning prosecutor, points to Joshua, to the excrement, to the putrefying stench, and says, guilty! He's guilty. Look at him. It's hard to argue with that. He's guilty. He sure is. He's guilty. The visible evidence against Joshua is indisputable. You cannot argue. The Lord made it clear that there's no room for argument. He is guilty. And Joshua stands mute before the judge. He cannot utter one word of defense. Joshua never speaks. He knows it. He knows it's true. He is condemned already, just standing there. Job says this. It's a good question. How can mere mortals prove their innocence before God? That's a question. Remember Job kind of went through some things, had a bad day, really bad, such a bad day. Then he had bad friends and a bad wife, and none of them would go away. Remember that? And Job says, how can mere mortals prove their innocence before God? Indeed, how? You can't. So, back to the courtroom. The prosecution has rested. All he had to do was point, get Joshua there and point at him. Looks guilty and a little stinky, actually. We're all holding our nose. Yeah. It's disgusting. He has a strong case, doesn't he? So the prosecution rests, and so Joshua's defense attorney takes the floor. Okay? Check this out. Verse 4. The angel, that is the angel of the Lord, that is defense attorney, Jesus, right? Said to those who were standing before him, remove the filthy garment from him. And to him he said, I love this. The angel says, hey, you guys, let's take these garments off of him. Then he turns to Joshua directly and looks him right in the eye, holds his face. The angel comes right to him. Jesus comes right to him, this defense attorney, and says what? Behold, I have taken your iniquity away from you, and I will clothe you with pure vestments. You see the contrast there? Filthy garments, pure vestments. Bleach, white, unblemished. And the defense attorney comes straight to Joshua and says, I will take your iniquity, and here's a brand new outfit. And the angel of the Lord solemnly assured Joshua what? Thus says the Lord of hosts, if you, Joshua, will walk in my ways and keep my charge, then you shall rule my house and have charge of my courts. And I will give you the right of access among those who are standing here. Who are those who are standing there? The remnant. I will give you the right of access among those who are standing here. His garments were exchanged, but his duty was also restored. The right of access to be able to serve the remnant. Technically, Joshua should be dead by law, right? But from the highest court, he is acquitted and cleared to return to his post as high priest. What? This is not what the law says. He should be dead. He's found unclean. But instead he was acquitted, and the Lord gave his job back with full authority. How important is it to us as the remnant to know this about Joshua? We're there. We're in the town square. We're in the gallery. We're hearing this. Our high priest should be dead, right? He's unclean, but the Lord said, I'm restoring him to duty. We need to know that. We need to know that our high priest has got the stamp of approval from the Lord to return to his post. Right? He is the mediator. He's the one who's going to atone for sin. We better know that it's okay that he's doing it. Right? The remnant. He's restored to full authority in his post in case anybody has anything to say about that. In case anybody in the crowd's like, no, I don't think so. He's like, the Lord said it was. He has full authority. And his defense attorney restores him whole in duty and duds. Right? They're in the courtroom. Whoa! Okay, wait a minute. You might be saying. I have a serious issue with that. This is a nice story and everything, but it's a little far-fetched. I mean, how does a defense attorney have the authority to acquit anything? He's not even the judge. The defense attorney is the one who acquits Joshua. He says, I will take it, here's some new outfit, and I'll put you back on the job. He has no authority to do that. He's not even the judge. Objection! Why isn't Satan yelling, objection? Where is the objection to this? You know better than that. Defense attorneys cannot acquit. It's not even their job. The criminal cannot just be handed a new outfit and be allowed to leave court. That's not a thing, okay? Now, I'm really glad you asked that. With so much passion and vigor, what I want you to do is put a pin in that for a minute. I want to show you guys something. In October 2019, there was a criminal case in Dallas, Texas that made national news, okay? The defendant was found guilty of murder, but what caught the nation's attention was not that. That happens, unfortunately, a lot. But what happened at sentencing when the victim's brother took the stand. The victim's brother. Watch this.
A powerful scene in a Texas courtroom. A man whose brother was shot to death by a Dallas police officer forgiving his brother's killer and embracing her.
I don't even want you to go to jail. I want the best for you. Because I know that's exactly what both of them would want you to do. And the best would be give your life to Christ. Again, I love you as a person. And I don't wish anything bad on you. I don't know if this is possible, but can I give her a hug, please? Please?
Yes.
And the judge also hugging that former officer, Amber Geiger, and giving her a Bible after sentencing her to 10 years behind bars for killing a neighbor, an unarmed black man, in his own apartment.
Wow. Isn't that wild? Now, this boy, this brother, showed a great act of mercy. What, Bible students, is mercy? Yes, Not getting something that you don't deserve, right? Getting something that you don't deserve is mercy. What she got that she did not deserve was a hug and forgiveness from the brother that she shot for no reason. That is mercy and forgiveness. Now, here's the thing. Forgiveness is wonderful, right? It is. But this lady, rightfully so, still went to prison. Hopefully for the 10 years. That seems a little shy. I don't know what's going on there, but that was the sentence, right? She still had to satisfy the payment for her crime, right? Forgiven, but still going to prison, rightfully so. She was granted mercy. She was not acquitted. She was forgiven, not justified. Not justified. They, Bible students, are not the same thing. We interchange them. That's a shame. Justified and forgiveness are not the same. What is justified? Just as if you never sinned is the easiest way to think of it because it's in the just as if, and you can kind of remember that way. This is a huge doctrine of our faith. Justification. You want to know this because you've been justified, and praise Jesus, you have. Because forgiveness is barely gets you there. Justified, that's a thing. Okay, and that's what we're going to talk about tonight. Justified, it's a definition of our faith. It's wild. It's an enormous truth. And this is what I'm hoping the Lord will come, boot me out of the seat, and take over. It's just a huge topic, and I don't want to do it any injustice, so just grace me for this. Justification, it's a legal term. It's a legal courtroom term. The definition is the absolute acquittal of one who is tried in God's highest courtroom. The absolute acquittal of one who is tried in God's highest courtroom. Joshua was forgiven when the filthy garments were removed. I forgive that. Let's strip that off. That's disgusting. Let's go burn it somewhere, but way over there. We're going to strip the filthy garments off. That's forgiveness. But he was justified when he was re-robed in pure vestments. That's justified. It's the great exchange. He was acquitted and free to go. Joshua was. He was fully restored as if he had never stepped foot in this courtroom to begin with. Never charged of anything. There's no trial. It doesn't exist. He's restored as if it never happened. Just as if I never sinned. And that is what's going on. Now, back to your pinned question that you so beautifully asked. How? How was Joshua free to go? Because here's the truth. The law stands. What law? The law of sin and death. It was introduced at the garden, and it is ironclad. It's not going anywhere. It's the law of sin and death. The wages of sin is death. That's the law. One miss of the mark and you're toast. That's the law, and it stands. It stands today. The price must be paid, and the price is death. That's the price. Joshua is guilty before the righteous judge who demands perfect justice and perfect righteousness without prejudice or preference. Perfect justice, perfect righteousness. Otherwise, he would not be just or righteous. It's rigid. He has to be just. He has to be righteous. It must be perfect justice or it's not justice at all. It has to be perfect righteousness or it's not righteousness at all. So how is Joshua walking out of this courtroom? Right? Remember what Job asked? How can mere mortals prove their innocence before God? He also asked this other puzzling question. How can a mortal be righteous before God? This is a conundrum. Now, question, we're going to do a couple what ifs. What if in this Dallas courtroom, same judge, same accused, same defendant, same attorneys, everything is the same. But the judge was feeling super merciful that day, and he turns to Amber, or whatever her name was, Amber, and says, "You're free to go. You can just go. I'm just going to let you go. Walk free, no questions asked, fully restored. Here's your badge." She's a police officer, which makes it horrible. "Here's your badge. I'm going to restore your duds, restore your duty. You're fine. You can just go." Would that not be a grave injustice to the victim and the victim's family? It's not just or righteous for them. It's not just and righteous for Amber either. It's just, I just feel like I'm just a God of love with no other balance. So here you go. Go. Nobody's getting justice. Nobody's getting righteousness. And that victim's family has just been scandalized by the judge, right? That doesn't work. The judge can't just let them go because he feels nice. He can't just lean heavily on his attributes of love and grace and mercy because that's off the podium of, I rule my throne with justice and righteousness. How can he be grace and just? It doesn't work. It's a conundrum. And that's what Job was asking. How can a perfect, holy, righteous judge acquit a criminal with such damning evidence? This is how. This is how. The defense attorney said in verse 4, "I have taken your iniquity away from you." Right? That's what he said. The judge, the Lord, can justify the guilty and remain righteous because your defense attorney, Jesus Christ, has stood in your place to absorb and appropriate and assume the full penalty of the law, that injustice to the fullest extent. He took it himself. That's how. The penalty is still coming down as just, as righteous as ever. The full penalty, it's still happening, which means the victim is still satisfied. In fact, it satisfies the full aspect of the law because no one's getting away with anything. Somebody's taking it to the full extent of the law. You were sinners, but you were washed, and then you were sanctified, and you were justified, acquitted of all charges. How? In in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ and by the Spirit of our God. That's how. You have been justified. How? In the name of Christ. He took it. Jesus took the full penalty of the law on himself. That's how. The defense attorney who was defending you stood up and said, I will take it. The full penalty of the law. I will take it. That's what Jesus did for us. That is justified, you see. Check this one out. Romans 5:9. Since therefore we have now been how? That's the only way. Death is the penalty of sin. It has to be the shedding of blood, right? Therefore, we have now been justified by his blood. Much more shall we then be saved, check this out, by him from what? Yeah, that's what you've been justified from, the wrath of God. Question, why do we need to be saved from the wrath of God? Because we're sinners, right? Because he is righteous and he is just, and the penalty of sin is death every time, every day, for everybody. Every time you sin. Every time. Every time you're dead. The penalty of sin is death every time, every day, for everybody. The Lord, the judge with the gavel, who sits, Psalm says, his foundations of his throne are righteousness and truth. It's what he sits on, because he has to be just, he has to be righteous, right? He's sitting on that. The judge with the gavel says, I cannot change the law. The law of sin and death stands, and so I will send my son. The defense attorney. I will send my son. And Jesus, the defense attorney who was standing to defend us, then bore the wrath of the righteous judge, his Father, in our place. Imagine how hard it would be for the judge to look at his innocent son, who happens to be the attorney that day, and say, I got this one, Dad. That's what he did. He took the wrath. He drank the cup of wrath that we deserved, Jesus Christ. He took it all. Every penalty for every sin we've ever done for all time, forever. He took it, and we walk. We're free. I am set free. It's true. What if, same courtroom, what if in the Dallas courtroom, same scene, same scenarios, same players, but the brother stands up, gives her a hug, forgives him, but then presents himself to the judge and says, and I will also go to prison on her behalf. I will also satisfy the judgment. The one that the crime, he's the victim of the crime, the brother of the murdered guy. And he gives her a hug, great, but also says, I would also love to satisfy the full penalty of this sin, this crime that was committed against me. I will take it. I will go. And she leaves, and he stays. That makes my stomach hurt. That doesn't feel right. That makes my tummy hurt. But she walks. The one who murdered his brother walks free, and she leaves as if she had never been in that courtroom at all. That's hard to swallow. That's justification. She has been justified by the blood of another who took her place. The law still stands. Guilty. Judgment. The law is still satisfied, but somebody else took it. The brother. We would hate that. That doesn't, it satisfies the law, but it makes me want to throw up. In a greater way, you guys, in the courtroom of heaven, we stand guilty. And our sins were against the Son. The defense attorney, we have whomped him with our sin. The very crime that we're standing there, it was against him. Against you and you alone have I sinned. It's against the Lord, but our defense attorney, he stands up with nailed, scarred hands and turns to his father, the righteous judge, who takes one look at his son who bears scars and says, paid, let her go. Jesus bore the wrath of the righteous judge in our place. Now, turn to Romans 3. Check this out. Now, here's the thing. Paul is a lawyer, which makes Romans hard to read because it's really smart and brainy, and you're like, dude, can we take it to a Peter level or something? Can someone rewrite this in Peter's words so I can understand what's going on? Romans, it's lawyer, it's high, it's lofty, right? He's the Pharisees of Pharisee. He is a lawyer in a court, and much of Romans is him defending Jesus as a lawyer, the gospel. Not that Jesus needs defending, but he is making this case, this legal case about the gospel and salvation. And check this out in chapter 3. It says this in verse 23. For all have sinned. How many is that? All. And fall short of the glory of God. That's all it takes. Our imperfections are blazingly obvious in the throne room of perfection. We fall short of his glory. That's sin. Sin is worthy of death every time. But we are justified by his grace as a gift. How? Just because he's feeling friendly? No. Through the redemption that is in Christ Jesus. It cost a lot. Whom God put forward as a... What does that mean?
To win or regain the favor of. I like to look it up because I had no idea.
That's good. This is another huge doctrinal definition. Here's the other thing with Romans. We're like, no. We just read it and we substitute words in that kind of sound the same, and we're like, that's pretty close. No, it's not close. Commercial, this is in the tools class. We pass up these words, but we have no idea what they mean. No idea. So we put forgiveness and love in for all these words. No, that's lame. That's not what it means. What does propitiation mean? It means two things. It's twofold. One coin, two sides. It means substitution, to stand in the gap for somebody else, take somebody else's place, but it also means satisfaction or fully satisfied. Because anybody can say, oh, I'll take that for you. But are they able to do it? Do they have the qualifications to satisfy that thing? Anybody can volunteer, I guess, if they're weird. I don't know if anyone will volunteer to die for me, but whatever. Like, oh, I'll do it. So Jesus is two things. He's the substitution. He stood in our place, but he also was qualified to fully satisfy the righteousness and justice of that thing. So when he came as a substitution lamb, he not only was substitution, but this lamb had to hold up to all the qualifications. Unblemished, perfect in every way. He had to pass the test. So he's our propitiation, satisfying both sides of that coin. He substituted in and he passed the test. He can satisfy that thing. So Jesus, it says, whom God put forward as a propitiation by his blood, or in other words, the Lord's like, the only way to satisfy the law, there's only one person who can do it, and it's my son, who is willing to substitute, and he also holds up the qualifications. So the Lord had to send his son. He's the only one who can do that. The propitiation by his blood to be received by faith. This was to show God's righteousness, right, as a judge, because in his divine forbearance, he has passed over former sins. How can he pass over former sins? Because there is a propitiation. Now you can acquit. Right? Check this out. It was to show his righteousness at the present time so that he can be just and justifier of the one who has faith in Jesus. How can he be just and righteous and also gracious and merciful? They don't play in a courtroom. Yes, they do, because of the propitiation. So he can be just and justifier. He can fulfill the law and let you go. Right? This is good. This is a night of good news. Once you're acquitted, this is the awesome thing about this, about it being a legal term, justified. Once you're acquitted, the defendant cannot be tried again.
Thank goodness.
So when Satan comes and tries to drag you to trial with the same thing he tried last time, the judge says, looks at his son and says, paid, and we go. Now this, he tries to accuse us day and night, right? But all he has is words. He has no power. You've been justified legally. He cannot bring it up again. Yay. It's a once for all deal. So the payment was satisfied, the full authority of the law, which means, you guys, because the propitiation was perfect, stamped, substituted, and held up, there is no loose ends, there's no loopholes, there's no room for appeals. There was nothing in this propitiation that you could poke holes in that does not satisfy the law. He does. He didn't come to abolish the law. He can't. The law of sin and death stands, and so he came to fulfill the law because he can do that. So now justified overrules the law of sin and death. We are now under the law of grace. A law that supersedes the law of death. It doesn't abolish it. It still stands, but it overrides it legally. The law of grace. Now, back to our text. How are we doing? Oh, man. I'm going to hurry. I did this last week. Verse 8. Joshua has been justified. He's been given his job back. Verse 8. Hear now, O Joshua. Here's some parting words as he's running out the door of this courtroom that we just stuck him in. Joshua, the high priest, you and your friends who sit before you, Zerubbabel, the remnant, right? We're all sitting there. All these friends sitting among you, for they are men who are assigned. Check. Behold, I will bring my servant, the branch, capitalized. This is a prophetic name of Jesus Christ. Bible students, if you want to go look at a really cool passage about this, Isaiah 11, verse 1 through 5, explains this prophetic name of the branch some more. And there's other places too, but go check that out. For behold, verse 9, on the stone that I have set before you, Joshua, on a single stone with 7 eyes. This is also in Isaiah. It explains it more. 7 is the number of completion. All it means is that the branch, Jesus Christ, has full wisdom and full understanding. It's a poetic way of saying it. Remember, Zechariah is that high, lofty. Haggai was like, pick up your hammer and swing it. Right? And then Zechariah is like having this tour with the angels and it's like, whoa, like that. This is one of those things, but you can chapter verses other places, and Isaiah 11 is one of those if you want to go look at it more. But this is Jesus Christ who has full understanding and full knowledge. He isn't lacking in being able to handle this stuff, okay? I will engrave its inscription, declares the Lord of hosts, and I will remove the iniquity of this land in a single day. And in that day, talking about the second coming, every time in the Old Testament you hear in that day or on that day, it's talking about the end, the second coming, the millennial kingdom. It is a phrase that means the end of stuff, okay? In that day, declares the Lord, every one of you will invite his neighbor to come under his vine and under his fig tree. A promise that the nation Israel as a whole, saved, will be in the millennial kingdom with Jesus Christ. So not only did what's his name? Zerubbabel get a prophetic, remember the signet ring? In the end, Joshua gets the same thing. In the end, he gets a promise too. In the end. Now, what does it mean? There's a lot in here, but basically, let me just sum her up. Joshua, you can't live up to this job. You actually suck at this. As it turns out, you have filthy garments. You're like the worst. The worst of the worst of the worst. You can't do this job. You're dirty. You're unclean. You fail, you fall. Guess what? We all do. We cannot live up to this job. Okay? I know that, the Lord says, but I am here. Remember that I am your defense attorney, the greater than Joshua, Yeshua. They have the same name. And remember that I am also the perfect high priest. I am. You can't do this, Joshua, but I can. And I have full understanding and knowledge. I've been given the full authority as the branch of David. I can cover you in this, in the things that you're lacking in. And in the end, Joshua, all will have atonement. Not because of you, because if the nation was relying on you for atonement, we'd all be in trouble, Joshua. Forget that. The atonement of this nation, Joshua, that's under your care, that you love so much, they will be atoned at the end because I am perfect. He says, You be faithful today, Joshua, and trust the remnant under my care from there. In the end, Joshua, there is atonement, and I am the high priest. And in the meantime, remember that you are justified and you are commissioned for service, so get back to work. It's a promise. It's a freeing promise for this high priest that just got hosed before the remnant, you guys. I wonder if he would have traded 4 or 5 messages that Zerubbabel got for the one that Joshua got. I don't think he's winking anymore. This is wild, right? 10 verses. Wild. Now, final thing, just a few minutes. Turn to Matthew chapter 27 with me. It's Passover in Jerusalem. Jesus had just spent all night in mock trials, being flogged and beaten and passed around to Herod and Pilate and Caesar and Pilate and Herod and passed around. No one wants to deal with him. But he had just, by Pilate, been declared innocent. I find no fault in him, he had just said. Meaning, Jesus needs no justification. Even Pilate, who's trying to put him to death, the people pleaser, cannot find anything wrong with him. He doesn't need acquittal. Check what happens next. Look at verse 17. Matthew 27:17. I guess I don't have that. There it is. Verse 15. Now, at the feast, the governor was accustomed to release for the crowd any prisoner whom they wanted. This was a tradition of Passover. Nodding to the scapegoat. If you guys know anything about that in Leviticus, the scapegoat, okay? They did this in real time. They're like, here's a gauntlet of horrible people that are in prison, and we're going to release one. It's going to be the scapegoat for our Passover lambs. So who do you guys want this year? Okay, that's what's going on. And they had a notorious prisoner named Barabbas. So when they had gathered, Pilate said to them, Pilate, who had just declared Jesus as perfectly innocent, says, whom do you want me to release for you? Barabbas or Jesus, who is called Christ? They were given an option. You can have Barabbas, who's like the worst prisoner they've got, or Jesus Christ, who I know is perfect. He's asking the crowd this. For he knew that it was out of envy that they had delivered him up. Besides, while he was sitting on the judgment seat, his wife said, have nothing to do with this righteous man, for I have suffered much because of him in a dream. She's even having nightmares about Jesus. Don't crucify him. Okay, check this out. Verse 20. Now the chief priests and the elders, who are they? Jews. Chief priests and the elders, the ones at the helm of the remnant that's in Jerusalem in Jesus' day. What they do? Persuaded the crowd to ask for Barabbas and destroy Jesus. You see that verse? Destroy. I mean, they're not even trying to sugarcoat it. They persuaded the crowd to ask for Barabbas and destroy Jesus. This is the saddest verse. This is not my favorite verse. The governor again said to them, "Which of the two do you want me to release for you?" They said, "Barabbas." Probably loud and raucously, because you'll see in a minute. "We want Barabbas," they said. Pilate said to them, "Then what shall I do with Jesus, who is called Christ?" And they said, "Crucify him." And he said, "Why? He's spotless. He's perfect. He has done nothing wrong." But they shouted all the more, "Crucify him." We are Barabbas, the most guilty, notorious criminal who walked free because of the Passover lamb, our high priest, our defense attorney, our propitiation, the one who bears the scars. We walked free, just like Barabbas, who is a perfect picture of justification, because in real time, he walked free and the lamb was slain. Same day, Joshua was justified, acquitted, because the defense attorney took his iniquity away.